Eric, you seem to be muted.
I like that. Off to a good start. Hi, everybody. This is the Somerville Historic Preservation Commission. This is our regular first of our two March meetings. It is Tuesday, March 21st, 6:49 p.m. And I'd like to call this meeting to order. And before continuing, I should say that pursuant to Chapter 107 of the Acts of 2022, this meeting of the Somerville Historic Preservation Commission will be conducted via remote participation. A recording of these proceedings can be accessed at any time using the registration link at the top of this agenda. And also, as is customary, we'd like to introduce ourselves to anyone who happens to be in attendance this meeting. And going across my screen, I'll start with Mr. Bauer.
Hi, I'm Dick Bauer. I'm an attorney and was trained as a city planner. I live in Spring Hill.
Thank you. We have Vice Chair Kelly.
Hi, I'm Robin Kelly. I am the Realtor representative on the commission, and I'm also a historic homeowner in Union Square.
And Mr. Shagnon.
I'm DJ Shagnon. I'm a landscape architect and a resident of Ward 5.
Thanks. And I'm Eric Parks, the chair. I'm a Ward 3 resident, or an architect, historic homeowner. And could staff, we have Ms. Chekowicz here.
Hi, I'm Wendy Chekwich, a preservation planner and planner with the Planning, Preservation, and Zoning Division and the HPC liaison.
And that is who we are. And we have a fairly small agenda meeting tonight. We have two cases and then some other business. And I guess without further ado, we'll launch to the first item on our agenda, which is HPC ALT 2022.66.66. The address is 97 Orchard Street. The applicant is Richard Roy. The owner is Tommy McCarthy. And the applicant is seeking a certificate of appropriateness to install a driveway. Is an applicant here tonight?
Will the applicant for this item please raise your hand and you will be unmuted. And you can unmute yourself by, raise your hand by pressing the little raised hand function. All right, Mr. Chairman, I am still looking. Mr. Chairman, the applicant does not appear to be present. Can you, I would advise if you could come back to this after the demolition item.
Sure, we'll do that. So 97 Orchard Street will bump to second on the agenda, and we'll advance the public hearing for category of determinations of historic significance, which for those who don't know about the process, it's step one in the demolition review process. The first, we review a project to determine whether it is historically significant in its own right. At this stage, we don't really consider things like alternate uses, condition of the building so much as just reviewing the, actually we do review the condition, but it's more of a review of the property itself. If we happen to view this as significant, then we have a public hearing the following month, which is a hearing to determine if the property is preferably preserved. And that would be the second step. And if we vote yes on that, then a demolition delay of 18 months, up to 18 months can be placed in the property, or less if some mutually agreeable alternate solution is agreed upon. So with that, let's open up to HPC.DMO 2023.04, address is 36 Hancock Street. Applicant is Zachary John Jakowski, trustee of the Zachary John Jakowski 2022 Trust. Owner is the same as the applicant. And the applicant seeks to demolish a building constructed a minimum of 75 years ago. Do we have an applicant here tonight?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I have unmuted Adam Dash.
You have indeed. Thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Dash.
Good evening,
Um,
Mr. Chair. Yes.
Once, Mr. Chairman, I have also unmuted the property owner, Zachary Jakowski.
Thank you. Could you also, Wendy, unmute Marilyn Modinger, the architect?
Yes,
Thank you.
everyone should be unmuted.
Fantastic. All right. Good evening. Adam Dash, 48 Grove Street in Somerville, representing the owner applicant, Zachary John Jakowski, trustee of the Zachary John Jakowski 2022 Trust. With me tonight are Mr. Zakowski and the architect Marilyn Modinger. And what we're seeking to do is actually preserve the existing structure by moving it slightly on the same lot, about 3 feet over. But as the definition of quote unquote demolition in the demolition review ordinance includes moving any structure to be quote demolition, we are here before you tonight. In addition, I would note that to moving the structure over a little, there's a later rear 20th century one-story addition that will be demolished and rebuilt because it's structurally unsound. The reason for moving the structure on the lots to place it on a new solid foundation and preserve it going forward. Applicant seeks to turn the structure from its current 2-family use back to its original single-family house use. And the house has been significantly altered over the years, as Ms. Modinger states in her memo from Runcible Studios. It was filed with the application. It is corroborated in the staff report. Marilyn, can you summarize what you found?
Sure. Hi, everyone. This is Marilyn Modinger, excuse me, of Cambridge. And if you saw my report, you saw that the house has been significantly altered in sort of aesthetic ways from its original construction. Not much remains on the exterior and the interior in terms of detailing and those sorts of things. That said, I'm excited personally to be preserving the massing and just moving it over instead of demolishing it. So I'm happy to give more detail on that if needed.
Thank you, Marilyn. Again, Adam Dash. I'd say in light of the situation, and being that we are paradoxically here for demolition review so the applicant can save the original house, the applicant is hoping that the commission could find the structure not to be significant due to its various alterations, so the applicant can get started on the foundation work and not have to spend time and money on returning for a preferably preserved hearing when in fact we're saving the house. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else from your group want to speak, or should we move on with the public comment?
Well, we're here for any questions that the public or the commission may have.
Yep,
Okay,
this
thank you.
is Zach, the property owner, just saying I'm here. Nice to meet you all.
Likewise. Okay, in that case, we will open up this portion of the hearing to public comment. Any members of the public would like to speak, please raise your hand and staff will unmute you.
Yes, any members of the public wishing to speak on this item, please raise your hand for a 2-minute public comment period. I would also advise the applicant team that they are not to respond to public comment as it's happening. The commission can ask you at a later time if you have it to address anything that might have been said, but you will need to wait for that moment to address any public comments.
Of course, thank you.
You're welcome. All right. Ron Cavallo, you are unmuted. You will need to unmute yourself.
Ron Cavallo, 70 Victoria Street, Somerville, Mass. Ward 7 resident and affiliated with the city of Somerville since 1894, 4th generation property owner and significant property owner. I fully support this project. Somerville needs more of this. They're retaining the structure, which I think has limited value, but I understand why they're doing it, and I understand that the massing has some interest. But I fully support this project, and as I have made it clear a number of times, I fully support development of the city, much of which is leaving the city, much to my disdain. And you will note that there are very few proposals before this historic commission for a multitude of reasons, most of which I think are negative. And I express grave concern about the economics of the city. It's falling apart, and I'm disgusted. I fully support this project. I think it's a wonderful project. We need more of these. And unfortunately, because of the politics in the city, there are fewer and fewer of them. This is an excellent project. I fully support it. I fully support what they want to do. I fully support the removal of the sections of the building that are in disrepair and the rebuilding of it, moving it, replacing the foundation, and turning it into a dramatically improved structure that will be energy efficient and assist the city of Somerville in its unrealistic goals of being net zero by 2050. I request that this commission make this easy for the applicant and just move this through. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, any other members of the public wishing to speak on this item, please raise your hand and you'll be unmuted for a 2-minute public comment period. All right, Paul Shannon, you have been unmuted on our end. You will need to unmute yourself. Paul Shannon?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, good. Well, the comments of the previous speaker notwithstanding, I live in the house next to 36 Hancock Street. And while I very much want to welcome the new owners to that house, I do have serious concerns about turning the next door lot into a construction zone with the noise and disruption that that will entail. Already Hancock Street has one construction zone, 5 houses down from us at the end of the street, which has been a real nuisance. People are unable to go by the sidewalk there on many days. In addition, across the street from 36 Hancock, there has been a dumpster blocking the street for the last, over a year anyway. There would simply be no room for a dumpster in front of 36 Hancock Street. However, as I understand it, this hearing is not about issuing a permit for the changes in the property, which actually sound fine to me. It's more, my concern is whether we will have a chance to negotiate with the owner and with the construction company on issues such as how many parking spaces we will lose on the street, how messy it will be, what time in the morning construction will start. Will we be able to negotiate that this construction not start until at least the loud parts of it till 8 o'clock? Those types of issues I would very much like to be able to negotiate with the owner or the construction company, because we will be living for quite a while in the middle of a lot of noise and a lot of disruption going on Hancock Street. And I just want to make sure that we can accommodate that as well as possible.
Thank you.
If there are any other members of the public wishing to speak on this item, please raise your hand and you will be unmuted. All right, Mr. Chairman, I do not see anyone else with their hands raised. You may close the public comment.
Okay, I'll do that. I'll close the public comment portion of this hearing for this case. Just to address quickly the previous call, the member of the public, you're correct. This is purely, we're focused on the structure itself and the demolition thereof. All the other issues you raised are, certain legitimate concerns of yours, but they're not really within our scope for the city. And I don't know if there's any other discretionary permitting and stuff like that involved, but that's where we are with this. And another question for staff, I guess. I get that the applicant intends to relocate rather than demolish the building. Is there any conditional, if we were to vote not to deem this significant because of that statement, is there anything that would obligate them to do that? Or could they turn right around and demolish it the next day?
I do not know that off the top of my head. Give me 1 second and I will look for that answer. All right, so you could declare it not historically significant with conditions.
Okay. I know we've done that sort of thing. It's just sort of a different angle. All right, well, let's turn it over to the commission then. What do you all think?
I apologize, I had lost connection and needed to reestablish it. So I just missed whatever the most recent conversation was. So I have a couple conclusions, and I hope I'm not sort of saying things that are, you think, will make people think, if you'd only been listening, you would have heard about this before. One of them is that this sounds like a great project that we got to facilitate if we can. But I am personally very reluctant to have us declare as not significant a building that seems pretty obviously significant to me, and I think to the developer as well. So I would be open to finding some other solution, but I don't like that particular solution.
I agree with that. I also have concerns about our, making official a statement that runs counter to what I suspect we would find, in the absence of the promise to not demolish the building, but simply to move it. I do think that we would be finding this historically significant. I find it to be that. It contributes significantly to the streetscape. It retains most of its, original form and massing. And I think that, to me, it seems like a clearly historically significant property. But I also agree with Mr. Bauer that given what we've learned from the applicant, it would be wonderful to try to expedite this process so that they can move forward with the project as they've described.
So I don't know if you, Mr. Bauer, when you were out of contact, I had asked staff, I don't know if you're part of that, what the hook is. I have the sense that I personally would be fine with moving this building 3 feet and keeping it. If we vote to not call it significant, is there anything that obligates them to not demolish it, but instead move it like that? And she said that, staff said that it could be a condition on our finding. I don't know what your sense of that is. You keep freezing on me. Are you there?
So I think we could condition the finding on them not demolishing the building and moving it over 3 feet. But I'm uncomfortable with saying you're entitled to demolish it on the condition that you don't demolish, and declaring it to be not significant if we think it is. And we also, along with the determination that a building is significant, is the next stage in which the public gets to weigh in on whether it's preferably preserved. And if we shortcut that process, we not only would be saying that the building is not significant when we think that it is, but we also would be depriving the public of an opportunity to weigh in on a building that we think is significant before anything happens.
If I may, Mr. Chair, Adam Dash again, I would say going forward, if you're concerned about a precedent, if the developer's agreement is to not tear the building down, if you were to waive significance on this, I think that would be a good trade-off going forward as a precedent. I mean, if to waive significance in light of the fact that no one's going to tear it down seems to me the whole point of this process. So other than just sort of the bureaucratic reason of having us come back, it kind of seems like wasting everybody's time, yours, mine, the clients and everybody's, and we all just want to get on with it while the weather gets warm so we can get going on it. Otherwise we'll lose a month. So if there's a way, I think the condition would be fine, because that's obviously the plan, is to move it 3 feet and rebuild that one-story later 20th century addition piece anyway that appears to have been an enclosed porch at some point in history. If we could do that and come to something where you could say whatever you want in your decision, You could say, we believe this is significant. However, we're only letting it go on the condition that they're actually not tearing it down. They're only moving it a de minimis amount of space to put it on a good foundation. I mean, that's a precedent I think you would want to set, because if developers want to go and do that, you're giving them a sort of a lane off the process. It sort of encourages people going forward to do what you want to do, to come back and to have it preferably preserved. And I'm trying to tell you, I'm going to preferably preserve it. It's kind of like, I get what you're saying, but it just seems like we're sort of in a little corner here, and it's not making a whole lot of like logical sense, although I understand the bureaucratic sense.
It seems to me that, I guess, the concern I think that Mr. Bauer is raising is whether we are just the simple act of saying not significant. I don't know, so it's setting a precedent, but if the condition attached to it is not really, I guess, how it sits with the official vote on it. And partially, I think maybe staff can remind us, we created this not too many years ago, this ability to vote something not significant with conditions. And we haven't done a lot of that, in my experience, at least. But if we were to do that, that would be considered part of the public record. And that would be, if this were to get demolished the week after, that would be considered as legally binding as not having gotten a demolition approval in the first place?
Correct. If you condition not historically significant, that they only move the building on site and not that they actually demolish 50% or more of the property, then yes, that is legally binding.
Let me ask staff, how much notice do we need to give before the preferably preserved hearing?
We've already done the legal advertisements for the April 4th meeting, so it'd be the April, I think it's 18th meeting.
So we cannot squeeze this into the April 4th meeting?
No.
Is that because of the agenda or the notices that we have to give to
The notices. The notices. So the notices were sent out, I believe, either I think sometime last week, if I remember correctly. I do know that they were already sent out to the printers.
Right. But is there a reason that, if it weren't for the fact that some have already been sent out, are we too late to send out notices for the April 4th meeting? Do we need to give more notice than we could if we were to decide today, let's put this on for April 4th? Could we do that?
No, because we have to notify it in the, we have to have it out 14 days beforehand, and we need to make sure it is also in the newspaper. And then because of the newspaper and the way it runs, we have to go actually send the notices out 3 weeks before a meeting rather than just the 2 weeks before a meeting because of the way the HPC runs on Tuesdays. The actual fine details are better known to our administrative assistant who takes care of all of the scheduling for this, but we do run HPC is unique because it does run on that Tuesday, so we run them 3 weeks ahead.
Mr. Chair, Adam Dash again, one could word a motion such that you would believe the commission believes that the building is significant with a small s. However, in light of the fact that the building's only being moved 3 feet, and being preserved, that the commission finds it's not significant with a large S. And you could put whatever condition you want, because obviously our intent is not to demolish it, other than to replace that 1-story little addition we discussed. And that way you would be setting in writing that you're not just throwing it out and saying it's completely an insignificant building, which no one's alleging. That's why we're trying to save it. However, you would say, because the word significant with a capital S has a legal meaning, you could say under the terms of the ordinance. So you could say it's significant with a small s or important or historically, whatever term you want to use, but you're not going to vote it significant such that we would have to come back because of this condition and only because of this condition, which my client would agree to.
Mr. Chairman, through you, the options, you have 3 options. It's declaring it historically significant, declaring it not historically significant, and declaring it not historically significant with conditions. Those are the 3 options available to the commission at this time.
Thank you. But it seems, I'm not so worried about setting some kind of precedent where we deem non-significant a project we would otherwise consider significant, as long as the net result is preserving the building. And that's why I'm kind of coming back to thinking maybe it would be okay to choose option 3 there. Because yeah.
I have a question for staff. If we determine this to be not significant, even with conditions that, it's only, it can't be demolished, it can only be moved the 3 feet. How does that impact, 7 years from now, 17 years from now, whenever it is, some other owner wants to do something to the property, and they, want to take it down, does the not significant designation continue into the future? Is that something that someone could present to ISD and say, this was deemed, in 2023, this was deemed not significant, so it can come down? Or, we can significantly alter the architectural style of it.
The historic significance vote would hold. My guess would be, though, that you have a condition that sits on it which says you cannot demolish it, though. So that would also would hold through it as well.
Normally,
that's what I was saying. That you would say that it was only you're only granting this because of the fact that it's being moved over 3 feet, and that only that, something that, some sort of definitive wording.
I think the reality is it is historically significant, and I do think that the city and the people of Somerville want the protections that provides for the property. I mean, but I'm just concerned that by declaring it not significant, even with conditions, that we may be leaving open some avenue for some future owner to do something that would be detrimental to the building and the neighborhood.
Don't
Go ahead.
Don't these things expire in 2 years? If we were to, I thought there was a what do they call it, a daylight, the legal term for that. If we deem something not significant, doesn't that last only 2 years, and after that they have to come back and reapply?
And that's right, Mr. Chair. It's Adam Dash again. Yeah, if that's the case, that you have to, I believe, start the demolition or pull a permit or something to that effect. I forget the trigger, but yeah, there is a 2-year requirement if you find something, not preferably preserved or not significant, that it's not forever.
On the flip side, though, if we did hypothetically call it significant and come back for a preferably preserved hearing next month and say, yes, we're allowing this to be moved 3 feet, and it became an MOA, a memorandum of agreement, that would usually customarily get recorded with the Registry of Deeds, wouldn't it? And it kind of attaches itself to the property on the file.
Mr. Chairman, through you, decisions are recorded with the city clerk, and MOAs are registered through the Registry of Deeds. On a separate note, though, the requirement, the time limitation you're looking for, is that if the building is not torn down in 2 years after the decision has been made, then they have to come back and go through the whole process again.
Right, but clearly,
Okay.
Adam Dash, we're not tearing it down in 2 years because the construction of what we're doing is going to take part of that time, and then why would we do all that and then tear it down like a year later? It makes no sense, So it's.
So Adam, the concern that I have is that, this sounds like a wonderful project, and it's very exciting that the owner wants to do this and to preserve the building. My concern is if, God forbid, something happens to the owner and the property is sold, what will some other person want to do or try to do? And so that's the concern. So while I believe in the earnestness of the applicant's presentation, I'm worried about some other entity in the future trying to do something to the building and making sure that we haven't sort of paved the way, cleared the way for that to happen.
Agreed. I mean, I would say that the condition would do that. And likewise, let's say you found it significant, not today, and then you did not find it preferably preserved next time, you'd be in the same boat as you are right now. So finding it not one or finding it not both still puts you in the same position where the commission is not finding it anything. So I think if the condition, you might as well do it tonight. It's the same position, but you could put the condition on, which, as Wendy said, would run with it as part of the decision.
Mr. Chairman, through you, a small clarification again on that time limit. We were able to do a little bit more research on that. So that 2-year time frame is only if you determine it historically significant, and then the property is not demolished within those 2 years. If you determine it not historically significant, then that doesn't have an expiration date. It's only the historic significance has an expiration if it's not torn down in 2 years.
And the proper way to do this would be for us to, based on, if everyone votes accordingly, that the property is historically significant, and then if we determine that it is preferably preserved, then it would be through the MOA process, that would be the solution that the city and the owner could agree upon. Is it's not actually going to come down, it's only going to be moved. It's only the small section that's going to be demolished, and it will be moved onto a new foundation 3 feet over. Because I don't think we would want to declare it historically significant and then somehow find that it's not preferably preserved, because I'm not seeing anything about the property that suggests that it's not preferably preserved.
I'm saying that's why the condition would exist. I think the condition gets you to the end, is basically like the MOA. You could just shortcut the process.
Would the condition be recorded?
We could, if you wanted to. I can record anything I want to record at the registry if you like. Whatever makes the commission comfortable.
I'm sorry, I'm asked. So Ms. Chekowitz, is that something, what would the process be for, not significant with conditions? Does that get recorded somewhere, or how is that? How do we make sure that this doesn't end up in a snafu at ISD where they're like, oh, it's not significant. Okay, you can demolish it. And, the future owner goes ahead and knocks it down, and then we're sitting here however many years from now going like, oops, it got knocked down and we didn't realize until it was gone,
Yes, so the decisions, the determinations of historic significance and preferably preserved are not recorded at the registry. We only record them with the city clerk. So that wouldn't be an option for safekeeping on the property in this case. I cannot direct you in any votes, but the most likely solution would probably be a declaration of preferably preserved and an MOA process if there was a concern.
As Adam Dash again, one could make as part of one of the conditions that this decision be recorded at the Registry of Deeds, even if it's not required. That could be a condition, and then I'd have to do it. Although I'm telling you, I would do it if you asked me to do it. It's not a big deal. I can e-record it in 5 seconds. It takes no time at all. So
I was just wondering that if an MOA, if you were to make this agreement and record it with the Registry of Deeds, it then becomes binding perpetuity.
Runs with the land.
The land. It's kind of a funny oddball, because if what staff was saying is that if we were to call this not significant, then forever and ever and ever there would never be an ability to rehear this case. If in 40 years someone wanted to knock the building down, someone could dig back to this day and say, well, you had a chance and you didn't call it significant then. And then someone could say, what about that? If someone even found out about the condition we attached tonight, I guess it would be in the city record, but I don't really know how these things work legally speaking. If there's a deed, if it's a condition added to the property that it could never be torn down, and if that became a condition tonight, that would seem to me to do the same thing. I'd kind of defer to Mr. Bauer here, or somebody with more
Mr.
legal
Chairman?
background. Yeah.
Through you, you could have a condition for the applicant to record it with the registry. That can be an additional condition.
What information would ISD have and what would be different in terms of what they were told if we determined it to be not significant with conditions that it not be torn down as opposed to otherwise?
To answer your question, we and the applicants are required to also present all of these decisions to ISD for their files. And they would have that on their records to look up at a later time.
So if somebody came into ISD and applied for a demolition permit 2 years from now, would ISD know to go find our decision, which said it's not significant on the condition that you don't demolish it, or would they not see it there? I'm asking in part because we've had slip-ups with ISD several times in recent years where somehow some information wasn't communicated.
We aren't able to promise that ISD will always be able to find that information. In a perfect world, yes, they would do their due diligence and be able to have that information, but we cannot promise that they would be able to look that up later.
I'm just not.
This is Marilyn Modinger, the architect. I'm just curious if in 2 years that situation exactly played out, and I, as the architect, were applying again, let's say, for a project like, or I was the new architect applying, I would say, well, this building's over 75 years old and you're trying to demolish it. We have to stop by Historic Commission first. I wouldn't go to, like, that's the rules, right? So like, that's what I have to do. So any building over 75 years old would be triggered to have that question asked, regardless of what's recorded at ISD.
You would hope. Unfortunately,
I would hope.
I guess
and you know that. Unfortunately, we've lost buildings because of miscommunications and unclear information, and so that's why we're nervous. That's why I'm nervous about this, particularly if someone's looking through a file and they're like, oh, not historically significant, and they don't see the sort of last part of like with conditions. I don't have confidence in ISD reading this correctly. And I am not at all concerned about this team that's spoken with us. You give me no reason for pause. I'm just very concerned about when something transfers hands, because that's also the instance when we've had issues where we've lost buildings. So
I think to you all, I mean, my 2 cents, not having spoken up on this yet, is I don't have any confidence necessarily that ISD would properly catch and record a preferably preserved status with an MOA 5 years from now or whatever. They should, but if they should also be able to flag not significant with conditions. And I think actually having something recorded at the Registry of Deeds is more likely to get flagged and noticed by any new owner, and much more likely to preserve the building. Now that could easily happen as part of an MOA too. The other thing that feels a little odd to me in this is that, I mean, this is only in front of us because of a weird IST technicality that completely leaving a structure essentially intact but moving it 3 feet counts as a total demolition. It's a weird case to be hearing.
Mr. Chairman, through you, my apologies for interrupting. That definition of demolition sits in the demolition review ordinance. So that's on our side that they're here.
Okay, so it's not an ISD thing, it's how the demolition review ordinance is phrased. Okay. Maybe we should look at that at some point in the future as next time we're reconsidering how the ordinance is structured, but that's its own issue. I mean, I wonder if there's something where, since the only thing that's being truly put in front of us to consider is the structure's placement on the lot, in some senses. Like, I mean, is there, I don't know. It feels to me like it could plausibly get handled with the conditions if we're very explicit in the conditions that because the intent is to preserve the structure, the only thing we're considering in terms of significance is its placement on the lot. And get it written in bindingly enough on things that that it gets recorded in the registry of deeds. I mean, that would be my 2 cents, and I feel better tracking that than trying to track either a significant or not, and preferably preserve status through ISD. You know, it's a little bit weird.
Ms. Chekowitz, a question. Given the circumstances of this and that we are trying to find sort of alternate solutions within the structures of how the mechanisms that we have available to us and are required to follow, would it be possible for your office to prepare the MOA that, are we able to have the same property voted, you know, on preferably preserved and adopt an MOA on the same meeting? Is there any way for us to expedite that process so that it would just be a 4-week delay, that it's not historically significant, and then there's, you know, another week or more or however long before an MOA can be?
No, I don't believe that is a possibility we would have. However, we could have the ability to have an MOA on a next meeting pretty quickly because it does not require a legal ad. It would only require an agenda. The issue with the MOA is we are required to have the vote first to make sure that happens and have these sort of processes laid out.
Okay.
But we could have the MOA 2 weeks at the next meeting right after.
Sort of a big picture thing. If we're not comfortable using the option to call something not significant with conditions in this case, then it would apply to any situation we'd want to use that. When would we ever exercise that? Is that suddenly not an option anymore? Are there any conditions where we would take a property that would otherwise be considered significant and say, no, as long as you do this to it?
Mr. Chairman.
As long as you save it, I would say that would be a fair thing. I guess, Wendy, I want to make sure I'm looking at the most recent version of the ordinance here in E8. I'm reading, it says if an applicant does not demolish a building within 3 years of a determination that the building is not a significant building, the review process must start over from the beginning prior to a building being demolished. That's what I was referring to, unless I'm looking at the wrong version. I thought even if you find it not significant, it isn't forever. Hopefully.
Mr. Chairman, through you, give me 1 second and I will go pull up my
I know
copy.
there's been like 3 versions in the last couple of years, so maybe I'm pulling the wrong one up because I'm trying to do it on the fly here. But I mean, I think if you did the condition and had it recorded, honestly, I think you're basically doing a baby MOA, which gets everybody what they want, I think, at the end, if you want my opinion. But obviously, I defer to you. I understand this is an unusual situation. I would say whatever the precedent is, probably never going to see this situation again, so it probably isn't going to come up. But and if someone wants to move it over 3 feet, have at it. You know, it's usually not an issue.
Mr. Chairman, through you, yes, actually, Adam Dash was correct, and misremembered the ordinance. My sincerest apologies.
Okay. Well, I feel comfortable conditioning this somehow. And I totally get your hesitation, but it seems like it's covered in a way. I mean, especially if it were to get recorded, then the net effect would be the same as calling it preferably preserved with the MOA that had been hammered out. We'd be achieving the same thing structurally, and it'll be no less likely to be found at a future date than it would be if it went through the whole process. You catch my drift there. So I really don't know how ISD would be more or less likely to notice this than it would if we had gone the preferably preserved route with an MOA.
So I think I could embrace something along the lines of what Mr. Chagnon described, which is not the main structure itself, but describing that what we are finding not historically significant is the placement on the lot and the rear 20th century addition that will be taken down. And that we are declaring it not historically significant for those aspects. And because I do want us to acknowledge, because I think, unless we won't know this until there's a vote, but if someone did want to demolish this, we would be calling this historically significant and we would be protecting it and moving it forward to the next step. And so I just don't want there to be any misunderstanding about what this commission feels about this structure. So I don't know if we can include something that says, we think it's historically significant, but on a technical reason, we're declaring it not historically significant.
Well, that'll be part of our findings, I imagine. We could say exactly that in our findings, and that would be in the public record.
Okay.
I think.
If we can make that very clear and also ask that the conditions be recorded at the Registry of Deeds.
Mr. Chairman, through you, yes, we can have the conditions be that the building is only being moved, and then also an additional condition that the applicant recorded with the Registry of Deeds. And the findings could be exactly what Mr. Chagnon and Vice Chair Kelly have stated.
No, I'm on the edge, but I think I'm moving in that direction. Adam, you are extremely persuasive tonight.
I think thank you, Mr. Kirchhoff. I really appreciate all of your flexibility. I think we're all in agreement here, and it's just very frustrating to have to have come here in the first place. When I pulled up the ordinance, I was like, oh, come on, but here we are, so.
Okay. But we appreciate your recognizing that you had to come to us, and then your care in reading through it carefully, including finding the provision that said that a determination that it's not significant essentially has a shelf life of only 3 years, and that after that, if somebody wanted to demolish it, they would have to start over again.
That's correct.
And given that, I think I feel comfortable enough with the idea of this sort of hybrid determination in which we say it's significant, but parts of it are not significant, and therefore we are determining it insignificant or not significant so that it can be moved 3 feet and preserved.
So I move that we vote to find the property historically significant. A no vote would mean that it is not historically significant. Although, we always want to phrase things so that it's in the negative, but now if I want it to be with the conditions.
Mr. Chairman, through you, in this case, the best way to do it is just to do the
Not significant with
motion.
conditions.
Yeah.
Okay. move, that we vote to find the property not significant, but apply conditions to that finding, including that the property may not be demolished, but it may be moved to a new foundation 3 feet from where it is now, and that the rear addition may be taken down, and that the applicant will record the conditions with the Registry of Deeds.
Prior to demolition, yes. Prior to moving, or we should probably put a time frame on that.
For the recording?
For the recording prior to starting work, I guess would be the best way to go.
Okay, recording that prior, well, I want it recorded right away, because again, God forbid, the applicant is hit by a bus and the property is sold. I don't want some other person to swoop in and take advantage.
Okay, if we set a time frame of say 2 weeks, do you think would the applicant be able to work with that time frame?
If you give it to me, I can record it same day. I just need a copy of it, like a certified copy to record. Excuse me, but I mean, you could say prior to pulling a demo permit as well if you wanted to do that. But
I just don't want it hanging out there.
Understood.
Yeah, but I think if we indicate, to be recorded within 7 days of receipt of the document from.
Certified copy of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so Mr. Chairman, through you, if I may, also have that the applicant will submit copies as a condition to ISD and preservation staff, the recorded decision.
Which ISD requires in order to pull the permit anyway, yeah. For zoning matters and such, yeah.
Also, this is Marilyn, the architect. I just want to make sure while we're talking about very specific things that we're demoing / moving / rebuilding, that if we're being really specific in what the motion says, that it considers all of the things that we're doing. So the front porch, for example, so I just don't want to get stuck in a thing where it says, very specific what we can move and can't move. And then we say, well, but we were also asking if we could rejigger the front porch, and then we got in trouble. So I just want to make sure that we're not.
What are the changes to the front porch?
That we are demoing it's an unconditioned enclosed porch and replacing with a new covered porch. There's also an enclosed porch addition at the rear that we are demoing. These are all 20th century additions.
Mm-hmm.
They were included in the little diagram that is in your packet, your letter from me.
Mr. Chairman, through you, yes, looking at the history of building on all the recorded maps, the porch in the front is the enclosure of the porch in the front is a later addition, and the rear additions are also later.
So the condition could just reference the existing front porch and rear additions as delineated on the staff report, or reference a drawing, which we seem to have.
To say, could the condition reference the applicant's packet of information?
Yes.
It's the Runcible Studios memo dated February 17th, 2023 with additions.
Mr. Chairman, through you, yes, we have that on file.
We have not seen that as commissioners.
Correct. That is sent to preservation staff, and we use it in our creation of our reports, but we do have it on file.
Okay.
But I think since we haven't seen it, let's be more specific so that we make sure that we've done what we need to do, and so the applicant can then go ahead and do what they need to do. So it sounds like you want us to be explicit about demolishing the front porch. Is that right?
For me, this is Marilyn, the architect again. Just if you are making a motion that delineates specific things, I just want to make sure that if something is omitted, that's not seen as we can't do that. There's this crazy stair that we're taking down. There's like a bunch of things that are, that are around that I just, if we were to list all of them, we certainly can do that right now. But
Let's
I don't want to
do
get
that.
caught.
I probably will only take us a minute or two, and then we'll be clear
Yeah.
about where we are, and
Sure.
then have clear guidance.
And Marilyn,
Sure.
I think there are only like 4 or 5 things you have on your first page of your report here
Yep,
that are
exactly.
relevant. Yeah.
Is there
Mr.
any way I can
Chairman?
share? Oops, sorry, go ahead.
Yes, 1 second. Mr. Chairman, through you, just a small note. For any work on the interior, we as the Historic Preservation Commission, unless through a preservation restriction, do not have purview over interiors, so you will not need to list any interior work going on.
Right. Yeah. Just looking at Wendy, if you look at the first page of what Runcible has submitted, it says
Mhm.
demo unconditioned enclosed porch, and there's I wish I was gonna hold it up to my camera, but you can't see me. It's pointing to where it goes on the plan. Demo unconditioned enclosed porch and replace with new covered porch on the front. Demo and rebuild single-story modern rear addition, and that's the single story we've been talking about. Demo exterior egress stair no longer needed. That's that crazy little metal spiral staircase in the back you see in the photos. Demo enclosed porch addition in the rear, replace with new exterior rear entry steps with covered landing. Demo and replace exterior deck. None of these things are original to the main building. These are, and as you hear, we're replacing them. They're not like going away permanently. And then there's a new exterior basement access stair, but it's not a demo thing.
Right. I think for our purpose, we don't need to know it's being replaced, although we are glad to know, but we just need to be giving permission for you to demolish the pieces that you can demolish, while making clear that the condition is that the parts you can't demolish, you can't. So that's why I wanted to just list them.
Gotcha. Understood. Well,
unless-
one would be
I don't-
one would be the front porch, and the enclosed front porch. One would be the rear single-story addition. One would be the exterior rear egress stair. One would be the enclosed rear porch addition and the deck. Is that everything, Marilyn, that's being demolished on it?
Yeah, I'm wondering if it might be easier to say it in the positive, what we are keeping. So what you guys want us to hold on to, which is the main body of the house, that may be easier than listing all these little things. I don't know.
I was just going with what Dick said.
Yeah.
Let me
I
actually
feel like-
just add on the things that you acknowledged that you haven't mentioned, but it's sort of implicit, which is the existing foundation.
Right.
That's the whole point of the project, yes.
Exactly.
That's from the grade up, the visible portion of the existing foundation.
But I didn't want there to be any ambiguity of saying, well, you can move it on the condition that everything stays, and there you are with the old foundation 3 feet over and nothing you can do about it.
Yeah, so that leaves me with 6 things then: front porch, single story rear addition, exterior egress stair, existing foundation, enclosed rear porch, and deck.
And we are determining all of those to not be significant in any sense, and therefore that they can be demolished.
That would be the request. Yes.
Unlike the house, which we are
Correct.
saying is technically not significant so that you can move, even though we find as a fact that it is.
Yeah, that's
And-
acceptable.
So I think we can wrap that into our finding, assuming that that's being noted right now by our note-taking people. That the condition is that we're allowing the things as aforementioned by Attorney Dash to be removed from the structure as part of the relocation.
Mr. Chairman, this is Ms. White, and yes, I captured all of those for your motion.
Thank you.
Okay. Do
Time
we have
for
a full? Oh, were you seconding it? I'm
I
trying
will
to remember.
second that. Not the appropriate time
everything.
for a second.
Okay. In that case, all in favor of the motion put forward by Vice Chair Kelly, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? And we'll do a roll call. Vice Chair Kelly,
Yes.
Magnan,
Yes.
Mr. Bauer,
Yes.
and I vote yes. And now just to make it a little bit more complicated, we have to adopt findings, which just as a framework, I think we want to incorporate that in view of, this is not a condition, so this is just the reason we decided this was that the scope, and that the scope entails maintaining the original mass of the structure will exist still. I'm getting lost in my thought there. Here, somebody else take over.
I would suggest possibly as findings that in light of what the proposed project is, the commission was only substantially considering the placement of the structure on the lot and the appurtenances that are being proposed for removal, and that we're not proposing that those are what is being declared not significant, and we're not proposing any finding whatsoever on the significance of the house itself.
Oh, yeah.
That would be my take anyway.
Right,
I
so
feel
we're
like
dividing
yeah, other than having sort of assumed that we probably would end up finding it significant and probably find up finding it preferably preserved. We haven't actually really discussed that at all. It's been sort of an assumed situation.
So what we're kind of saying is that the siting, the location on the site is not significant, and the portions that will be removed from the structure are not significant. However, and then that's all the scope is on this.
That's what I would propose as well.
Changes are not significant. Yeah. Huh. That's it with you, Mr. Bauer.
I think that's okay with me.
Okay. Well, if that's the case, then unless anyone wants to change that, let's have a motion on the findings.
I move that we vote to adopt the findings as just discussed.
Second that.
By Mr. Chagnon, all in favor? Aye.
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 Opposed? Roll call, Vice Chair Kelly,
Yes.
Mr. Chagnon,
Yes.
Mr. Bauer,
Yes.
and I will vote yes.
Well, thank
So,
you.
Thank you. Sure. Good luck with your project, sorting all this out.
Yeah, and I appreciate you taking the time and thoughtfulness on this. I know it's an odd situation, it's a big ask, but I do appreciate it. Thank you so much. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
apologies, this is Ms. White. If I could through you, who was the second on the first vote for that motion about the building being historically significant? Was that Mr. Chagnon or Mr. Bauer?
Mr. Chagnon.
Mr. Chagnon, thank you.
Okay.
Interesting intellectual exercise.
Yeah, it's always like you feel like you need to, it seems obvious, but you need to consider any possible, I don't know. Knowing that these things expire in 3 years is good. Anyway, we have one more case tonight, which was HPC ALT 2022.66 97 Orchard Street. And the applicant was Richard Roy, owner Tommy McCarthy. The applicant seeks to certificate of appropriateness to install a driveway. And is the applicant here now?
Mr. Chairman, yes, Richard Roy is here. Richard, you are unmuted on our end. You will need to unmute yourself by pressing the little microphone. You were unmuted for a half second.
Show you with this.
Perfect.
Can you hear me now?
Yep, thank you.
Okay. All right. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen.
Good evening. Welcome, Mr. Roy. Can you just give a quick, we see a staff report, but just give us a quick rundown of your project.
Tommy and I started out right from the beginning. We tried to make this as minimally invasive as possible. So we just did, instead of doing a whole driveway and butting up to the neighbor's yard, we just did the 2 brick paths, just to get him what he wanted, to have a place to pull his car into without affecting much at all, you know. So we made, it's just 2 simple brick paths, 2 feet wide by 22 feet long. And it's, I mean, it's almost 5 feet actually away from the other property. We took the 3 feet that we needed to be away from it, and then we added an additional, there'd be like 3 more feet of grass there before even the other, the right side path would be there. So we're not even, you know, we're not bothering them. We talked to the neighbors. They're all okay with it. So, you know, I mean, he just wanted a driveway, you know. I mean, he keeps his house looking, you know, pretty well, you know, historically saying. I mean, he was not looking to do any big changes. He just wanted to have a driveway put in.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, let's move then, assuming you're wrapped up, to the public comment portion of this case. Any members of the public want to speak? Raise your hand and staff will unmute you.
Any members of the public wishing to speak on this item, please raise your hand for a 2-minute public comment period. All right, Mr. Chairman, I don't see anyone with their hand raised. I'm going to give it 1 more second just in case anyone's having trouble finding the raise hand function. All right, Mr. Chairman, there are no members of the public with their hands raised. You may close the public comment.
All right, I've closed the public comment portion of this case. Anybody have any thoughts on this in the commission?
I have as the landscape architect hat immediately goes on, and I mean, my question to the applicant would be why it doesn't end up centered on the curb cut, because it's aligned directly with the left-hand edge of the curb cut. And I think from a practical standpoint, it's going to be a little bit awkward. I'm guessing it might be, is there a 6-foot minimum from the street tree or something like that that drove the placement of the curb cut?
I mean, it actually, the way I see it, it actually works out almost right with a full piece of curb. If you go 6 feet from the tree, it works. So, and you'd be driving that way anyways. The turn in works fine.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think.
I mean, it wasn't like in the middle of the cut. It was, oh, sorry to interrupt.
No, go ahead.
You know, but we measured from, you know, both ends and which way, you know, he'd be also turning in from. And I mean, it's definitely doable, and it takes up, you know, the least amount of space possible. Originally, we had, on the application, we had written the curb cut being the same size as the driveway. When you wrote back to me that it had to be smaller, then we realized, you know, I was trying to keep it in line, you know, and draw it myself, you know, at first, till I got the landscape guy to do it. But like I say, now it's 9 feet now, and from the
I see.
on the
Yes.
revised plans, we changed it. I made it less than.
Right, the revised plan,
It's 8.
the labeled dimension says 9 feet, but the curb cut itself actually appears to be wider. And you're saying that it's just that the line work didn't get updated, but the dimension did. There's the proposed two 2-foot strips with a, oh no, that's a 3-foot aisle between them. Okay. Well, in any case, I mean, remind me, is Orchard a one-way?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So, and in the direction he's coming from would be sort of top of page on the.
No.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense. So then he'll be naturally aligning with that.
We did a dry run with the car parking where the curb cut would be and everything else, you know, to see how the swing would work, and it's definitely doable. I mean, it's
Yeah,
not-
it was more curiosity. I mean, I don't think it affects, you know, whether this driveway is an appropriate measure. It was just more of a question of, you know, I immediately triggered on, I wonder why the paver strips aren't centered on the curb cut. But you have your reasons, and that's good enough for me in terms of answering that question.
Mr.
The owner's
Shagnall,
doesn't affect it.
Mr. Shagnall, just to be clear, the one would be turning left into the driveway.
Oh, okay. Not turning right. Well, in any case, I mean, if the owner is comfortable with it, then how the strips align with the driveway, I mean, if we were showing them in a different spot, doesn't much matter. And I think respecting the wider buffer to the neighbors makes a lot of sense. It wasn't a concern about appropriateness. It was just a landscape design
About parking
question.
spaces.
About parking spaces and also about like the placement of the curb cut. But I recognize that those often get dictated by what's going on the street, which is probably what's going on here. And that then you place your driveway somewhere within the curb cut. If he's fine with it hugging the left edge, then that doesn't really affect it.
Yeah, it almost looks like, I mean, it was planned that way. I mean, right where the curb cut is right where if you looked on the original picture of the house, it has a 2-foot concrete path. Yeah. And that's where the left tire path would be. So if you followed that straight out to the street, you know, it lands right where the curb cut is anyways. The break in the curb is about 16 inches to the left of that. And then, so the actual center of the driveway is the 9 feet fits right inside of that. I think the curb was 11.6 or something.
Right. Yeah, that works out well for you. You don't have to go cutting curbs and tearing out too much extra street. Anyway, so that aside, in terms of the actual proposal, I think that from the landscape architectural view on it, you know, this falls under the design guideline that, you know, changes must frequently be made to accommodate new condition. That's a transition feature between the structure and the newer surroundings. I think this is proposed to be done in a pretty nice manner. And I think the proposed pavers, you know, they're a precast concrete paver, which is going to hold up a lot better than brick, but they're brick-like in scale and in color. And I think my take on it from the street is that this is going to look pretty appropriate.
I agree. I think that the, having just the ribbon style driveway and the use of the brick style pavers makes it so it's not a concern for me. The one thing that I did want to note, just for clarification, typically when we reference, the left side or right side of a property as the description and the plans do, we reference those as looking from the street. And so in the description, this was indicating the driveway would be on the left side of the property, and that's not the case. It's on the right side. And the orientation of the drawings was a little bit confusing because it's not with north to the top of the page or, the view from the street. So anyway, I just wanted to make sure that information on this is clear, that it is the right side of the property, sort of the southeast side.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you. Any thoughts, Mr. Bauer?
No, it all seems very reasonable to me.
Yeah, I concur. I don't really have any misgivings at all with this, so it's fine.
Great. I move that we vote to approve the project as outlined in the report.
Is that
Kelly?
with the recommended conditions?
I second
proposed
that.
by Sam?
Seconded by Mr. Bauer. Oh, sorry, cut you off, Mr. Chagnon. What were you saying?
I was clarifying, is that when you say as in the report, is that also including the recommended conditions as proposed by staff?
Yes.
Right, okay, because the staff always says conditions. Yes, incorporating conditions presented by staff. So we have a motion. All in favor, say aye.
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 Thank you very
Vice Chair
much.
Kelly? Oh, sure. I was just going to do the quick roll call for this since we're remote. Vice Chair Kelly,
Yes.
Mr. Chagnon,
Yes.
Bauer,
Yes.
and I'll vote yes. So, yeah, thank you guys.
Thank you very
Um,
much.
So we are done with the two cases. We have our, let's pull up the agenda here.
Not that you can hear me.
Other business, we have minutes, December 20th.
Gesundheit.
Bless you.
God bless you.
I can't speak fast enough.
Regarding the minutes, I was absent for the meeting, so I can't really comment on the content of the minutes. I'll have to defer to other people as to whether those are correct. But the file name has a typo in the date. It listed as 2023-12/20. It's correct in the minutes themselves, so.
Needing to mute. There. Excellent.
Yeah, I had no questions, comments, corrections for the minutes.
I didn't either. It's a very brief meeting, as I recall. If nobody has any comments, then we could take a motion on this.
I move that we vote to approve the meeting minutes from the December 20th. Do I have that date right? December 20th meeting.
Here we go.
I second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Vice Chair Kelly,
Yes.
Mr. Chagnon,
I'll abstain, given that I wasn't present, I think is the proper procedure.
sure. Mr. Bauer,
Yes.
and I'll vote yes. Okay, and that takes us to the bigger thing, the draft rules of policy and procedure. And
Mr. Chairman, if I may, before we go into that, and this is going to something we'll talk about in the rules, but I just want to note that in the minutes, when we talked about a meeting calendar back in December, we said that we would revisit it in 6 months, which would be then in June. We are about halfway through that process. And I have suspicions on what people will do when we get to that stage. I certainly know what my opinion is.
Okay. So at the last hearing, we had, you had raised some concerns and observations, Mr. Bauer, about the, I guess making sure, if I can paraphrase, grabbing some of the content from the earlier rules that we had, making sure that we were consistent, incorporating those.
There were one or two items where I don't necessarily care that we're being consistent, but to the extent that we made decisions in the past about procedure and are going to do something now, I just want to make sure that it's deliberate when we do those and not simply because we have forgotten that they were there. One of them is we had required a supermajority for recommendations with regard to historic districts. I personally would be happy to see that supermajority requirement go away. But as, again, I want to make sure that that we're doing this deliberately and not simply going from one set of rules to another without thinking about what we're changing. I also had a bunch of other notes and comments, which I gave to staff, but I have to confess I didn't give them to them until this afternoon. And I appreciate staff reminding me that I had promised them. So they have not had time to digest them, and I'm not sure what we do with that at this evening's meeting.
Mr. Chairman, if I could through you. Yes, thank you, Mr. Bauer. So yes, since we did just receive the comments later this afternoon, what I'd like to do is like to see if there are any other comments, if Mr. Bauer would like to talk about any of the comments that he provided in the meantime, and if the rest of the commission had any other comments. Other than that, what I'd like to do is I'd like to be able to take the time to digest Mr. Bauer's comment so that I can provide appropriate feedback as to the where and why with some of the changes that were made or some of the requirements that are that are in there now. But if you would like to have a discussion about them or any questions that you might have in the meantime, I'm here and happy to hear them.
I think that sounds
Sure. So
good
let
to
me. Oh, I'm sorry.
Well, I was going to suggest if there's anything that you, in your comments, that you feel would be good to bat around here and discuss, let's have at it.
Sure. So a bunch of the comments had to do with form, and I won't talk about those. And some of my comments had to do with when we do and don't hold public hearings. And I had been corrected that we hold more public hearings. I thought some of what we did that was not in the form of public hearings, I now understand, are in the form of public hearings. For example, the first stage of demolition review, which used to be a meeting, but is now a public hearing. We always took comment on it, but we did that before as a matter of discretion, and now, as I understand it, it's required. There are things that we do that are not necessarily in the form of public hearings, even though they are in the form of public meetings, and we may take input. And I think the draft sort of assumes that almost everything is either based on an application under the demo review ordinance or based on an application under the historic preservation ordinance, and doesn't say enough about when we are making other kinds of decisions and what processes we need. So I would ask staff to go through and look at those things and make sure that we're making appropriate arrangements for the things that are not necessarily in the form of public hearings. I've mentioned this issue of supermajorities for recommendations about historic districts. I'm not sure. So two thoughts on that. One of them is, as I've said, I actually am not in favor of the supermajority, but want to make sure that if we eliminate it, that's intentional and not just inadvertent as we go from one set of rules to the other. And I don't know that there's anything in these rules that tells us how to go about doing things like making recommendations about historic districts. Because as I said, it focuses heavily on historic preservation decisions and demolition review decisions. A few particular things that have been put in that I think are not necessarily appropriate. One of them, if you go down to standards of conduct, section B, meeting participation, and I've noted to staff, I don't think meeting participation belongs in standard of conduct, but I also wanted to flag a couple of particular things that are in it. So in the meeting participation, as it's drafted, it says a member who's absent at a meeting when an application is discussed and then continued, the member may participate if basic, and I'm going to paraphrase now, if the member has done his or her homework and then B, submits an affidavit to staff attesting to that fact. I don't think the affidavit requirement is appropriate. I think it's our judgment about whether we are sufficiently familiar to weigh in on things or not. And I think we have a pretty good track record of people using discretion and saying, I think, you know, I know enough about this and I can take part, or no, I don't think I know enough and I'm not going to take part. And I think an affidavit is both cumbersome, but also unnecessary. Next Roman numeral,
Sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry, please.
Oh, I'm sorry. Sorry, Mr. Bauer. Mr. Chairman, through you, if I could, we do have that in there because that is actually a requirement. I forget if it's I believe it's the open meeting law requirement. I don't think it's in the ethics, but I believe it's in the open meeting law requirement that if you miss a meeting when like it's been opened, it's not a question of like, you know, if you open a case and then continue it because somebody's just asked for continuance, that doesn't matter. But if a case has been opened and testimony has been taken, and then no vote is taken, but the actual case is continued to another time, like let's say it's a case about historic significance, you can't make a decision and you continue it to the next meeting, then those are the types of situations that we're talking about. And members of boards and commissions are required to submit an affidavit so that they can participate. So that is in there because it is a legal requirement.
Okay. If it's required by the open meeting law, then
yep.
We should do it.
Yep.
I'm surprised that issue then hasn't been flagged before.
Well, I think we haven't had to flag it because, well, one, the open meeting law being in existence and how much it's changed, your last set of rules was adopted in 2003 or 2004. And honestly, I think in all of the years that I've been here, I can think of maybe one time when you've continued a case, literally in all those years, because you weren't able to make a decision on the night that it was first opened. So yeah, and I think and that was also a time too when you had different members who could make and not make a meeting. So it actually wasn't an issue because those folks weren't actually
required than it needs to be there. I'm actually thinking, frankly, more about the community preservation committee, which often has the same decision in front of it 2, 3, 4, 5 months in a row, with a changing cast of characters as people come and go. And if people who have missed a meeting can't vote on it at the next meeting, it could be quite problematic. So if I ask that you flag where in the open meeting law that is the next provision also required by the open meeting law? That if you miss 2, you can't do your homework?
Yeah, if you've missed more than 2, you cannot vote. Yeah.
Right, and that's in the open meeting law.
Yeah.
If it's on the open meeting law, then we don't have any choice in the matter, even though I don't like it and it's appropriate. But that's, if it's there, then it's not, I don't get to have an opinion. Or I don't get to act on my opinion is more.
That's more like it. Exactly.
I do get to still have an opinion.
You can still have your opinion, exactly.
The last one in small Roman numeral 3, I think carries over some stuff from the old rules, which I think was actually wrong in both rules, and it doesn't carry something in the old rules that we might want to think about having in. The thing that got carried over is that as written, alternates can only vote if they're acting in the place of a full member who can't. By that test, an absent member, he's filling what's basically a vacant seat. And I don't think it was our intention to say people who are filling in vacant seats don't get to vote. I think our intention was we want to be up to our full 7 as often as possible, and if we don't have enough full commissioners, then we use alternates. But it's not what the old rule said, and it's not what this one says. The thing that was in the old rule that is not here is it said that when we're choosing which alternates are going to vote, that we should have an objective method. Doesn't specify what it was. Our old objective method was first come, first serve. Whoever got to the meeting first among the alternates got to vote until we used up all of the seats. We don't have to specify that, but I like that the old one actually said there needs to be some objective method, so it's not simply chairman using his vast powers in devious ways to say, I don't want to have this particular person voting because I don't like how they're going to vote, so I'm going to designate somebody else. So I like that the old one said there needs to be some objective method that's used to determine among alternates who's going to vote.
Yes, then Mr. Chairman, through you, if I could, Mr. Bauer, yes, that's fine. I can change that language. I think though that objective method should be codified in the rules.
The particular objective method.
That's correct. That's
Yeah,
correct.
I'm not averse to that. I would be happy just have the old one that just said there has to be some objective method. But I would rather not leave it the way it currently is drafted, which essentially leave to the unfettered discretion of the chair, much as I trust the chair.
Sure.
I was chair for many years, and if I were chair, I would not, I don't like any restrictions on it. I would have wanted to have full unlimited discretion, but.
Yeah, just so to be clear on that, that's always been the way. We have
no longer chair. I think there should be constraints.
And is there any reason we can't keep it that way?
That the first person in the room, as it were.
So that I was picking up on what Dick was saying earlier about the alternates not being able to vote. What's this say? No vote unless designated by the chair to act in the place of a full member who is absent, has a conflict of interest, et cetera.
Right.
So just to make sure I understand that, if we have 6 commissioners there, quorum is 4, we have 4 alternates, or 2 alternates and 4 regular members. Is that then saying that those 2 alternates don't get to vote?
That is correct. And that is actually the way alternate members and regular members, that is one of the differences between alternate members and regular members in general on these boards and commissions. Alternate members can always participate in discussion, always, 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 but their vote can't, if you have a quorum, their vote can't count towards the actual overall decision.
If we had 7 regular members.
If we have are you saying if we have a quorum? So if there are 4 commissioners, the alternates don't get to vote?
That's right.
That's never how we've done it before, and I don't think that was ever our intention in our rules to do it. And is that what you think the ordinance says?
I think that's, yes, I think that legally that is what we just discussed is actually correct, yes. For example, if you take a look at like, what was I going to say? It's like you take a look at like ZBA and planning board, like unless they're missing members, their alternate members participate in the discussion, which is extremely valuable, but they actually don't vote.
Right. So can we look at the ordinance, and we may want to ask for city solicitor's opinion.
Sure.
I mean, it may be that the commission likes that and wants to have it the rule, but I don't, and don't want to have it the rule unless it has to be.
Right.
So I would want some guidance that said we cannot have alternates voting. We can't go over the 7. That I understand. I'm not saying all alternates should vote, even if that means a total of 10 votes. But our practice was always we could sit in panels of up to 7, and if we didn't have enough commissioners, then we filled the balance with alternates.
As I read this, the text of this though says, unless designated by the chair to act in the place of a full member who is absent. So if we had 6 people, I could designate 2 alternates to replace, because we have 7 full members who could be there. Let's say we had 7 full members and 4 alternates, for example. So it just becomes more of a bureaucratic thing.
Eric to be saying that we should not be doing that. If we have 4 full members, we shouldn't let any of the alternates vote, not even up to that number of 7.
That seems wrong to me.
If the ordinance requires it, or if the city solicitor's office says that's how it has to be, that would be one thing. But certainly it's a matter of choice. I think our system of saying we want to have DJ, for example, as a voting member, even though he's an alternate, as opposed to just sitting there and saying, well, the others of us get to vote, but he doesn't, when we can sit in a panel of up to 7.
Right, if Ryan were here, he wouldn't have voted at all tonight, which even though it would only be 5 of us.
Right.
Yeah. All right, well, let's just look into that because I'm in agreement with that. That's the way we've done it the last, I don't know, 16 years or whatever, as long as I've been on the thing. So if our solicitors can check that out,
Sure.
that would be great.
That, next substantive item, which is sort of a repeat of what I had mentioned just before we started, is that this says we're going to meet on the first and third Tuesdays. We said we would revisit that in June, and I suspect that it's not going to last. So we don't want to lock that in when we said right now we're just doing this on a trial basis.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, through you, if I could, because that's what you're doing right now, we have to put in how you're meeting, and then all that you would do if you change that, if you decided to change that in June, we would just like quickly re-update the rules and just have you do a quick vote on that.
Although one of the things that this says is we'll do an annual calendar.
Yep.
And as of now, we can't do an annual calendar because we have not made a decision about what we're going to do past June.
We actually had to put out a calendar for the year with the tentative meeting dates. So they do cover two meetings a month right now. If that changes, then we will adjust that calendar.
Next one for me, and it's sort of related to that.
So could you give the section or page that you're on with these?
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Sorry, I'm just scrolling through and I was not being careful to tell you where I was.
I was trying to do really quick searches, but I couldn't type it up.
Thank you for stopping me and making me go back.
That's okay.
And do this. So let me just see. So that was the beginning of 4A, small Roman numeral 1, small letter A.
Okay, very good.
At the top of page 5 in my version. In 4B, excuse me, small Roman numeral 1B, excuse me, it says, except by majority vote of the commission, no items of business will be taken up after 9 p.m. You know, and we've been having these conversations about how late to go, but the commission is going to weigh that against the need to meet twice a month. And so again, we should think before we lock ourselves in on that. I also don't like the idea of having the default be that we will adjourn, so that even if there were not a majority of members who voted to adjourn, the default would be that we would adjourn unless a majority of members voted otherwise. So a vote in favor of adjournment 2-2, which looks like it has failed, would in effect be that it passed because the default is to adjourn. I'm fine with a preference for wrapping up by 9. But to lock ourselves in seems to me to be not a wise thing for us to do.
Just to clarify, Mr. Chairman, sorry, Mr. Chairman, through you. Is it to locking yourselves into not taking up anything after a particular hour, or?
Primarily, yes.
We can definitely, definitely. The reason why we wanted to do this, just to give you all the reasoning behind it, is if you notice that it was, say, like 9, and let's say you had another case left or 2 other cases left, you could say, you know, it's 9 o'clock. We should consider whether or not we want to take on these next 2 cases or continue them to the next meeting. And, you know, maybe you vote to yes, continue or not. If you make a motion and it fails and you can't adjourn, then fine. But the reason being that if you have a lot of items on your agenda, like in the past, especially when you meet once a month, there can be a lot of items on the agenda, and it's gone till like, you know, 10:30, 11, 11:30 at night. And I think that there's something about the fairness of that to you all as commission members, but also fairness to the public too, because we have a lot of people from the public who want to, you know, maybe make comment, and staying up that late to do it I think it can be a lot to ask, and it can be a lot to ask of applicants, and they all want to be heard, but I think it's also very frustrating for the applicants or the public to be staying that late. And I think the longer the night goes on, the more tired and whatnot, and more challenging it can be for a commission. So just so you know the reasoning behind it, that's why we put that in there. And I mean, for the most part now, your meetings, if we didn't have to discuss this stuff, we would have been done at like 8:15 tonight. So they can go a lot faster.
Okay, so we're staying up late to discuss whether we should stay up late.
That's right. That's right. At the moment, yes, exactly.
We jump down to still in number 4B, small Roman numeral 2A. There's a order in which we do things, and this says that after the applicant presents, the staff should present. And we had, the commission is free to change the order, but we had decided a number of years ago that we should take all of the public testimony first before we had the staff present, in part so that we could go directly from the staff presentation into the discussion by the commission. When staff went first, a lot of the testimony then ended up being directed at staff, and staff ended up responding to the testimony. So we had moved the staff presentation until after the public had gotten a chance to speak. And I balance think that was a better order. Other people may agree.
Yeah, I think I like that. Is the staff being the last people to talk before we start discussing it as a commission. You can have, that gives you a chance to procedurally review, address things that might have been said by the public.
Very good. I can change that. Mr. Chairman, through you, items 5 and 6 also say public testimony in favor of the application, public testimony against the application. Typically the commission just takes public testimony irrespective and doesn't take it in any order. Is that agreeable? So that if I just change that to, instead of in favor or opposed, that it's just public testimony on the application? Yeah, and I would just then move that up higher in the list.
Yes.
I actually lost where we are. Can you repeat where we are in your minutes?
Yep. Section 4, item B, meeting management, Roman numeral, small Roman numeral 2, public hearings, page 5.
Okay.
Yeah, so I think it's a good idea to not, in the rules, break them into in favor or against. We could decide in a particular instance to group people that way to make it easier for them and us. But,
sure. If you think that you have like a big attendance for like any particular case or something like that, yeah.
Okay, thank you for
I'm
flagging.
looking at an old printout. That's what's going on. Yeah. I'm looking at a printout from the first draft, so my numbers don't sync up. Okay. Yeah.
On to the next page, still within 4, which I think is 4B, small Roman numeral 5, public participation, B, small Roman numeral 1. It says there's a 1 week before, as a deadline for written public testimony a week before the commission meeting. We often get stuff submitted much closer to the meeting. Is there any reason why we should insist that it be a week in advance?
Mr. Chairman, through you, yes, it is specifically because of that. Other boards and commissions do put a deadline on like when public comment can be, when the written public comment period is open or closed. And the reason why we have it so far, so like a week before your meeting, is when we get comments, where if we don't have a limit on it, and if we put that limit too close to when your packets need to go out, staff doesn't have the time to compile everything, and it really needs to go together in your packets separately, as opposed to us having to then one-off send you all emails, which gets to be confusing and it gets to be a lot. So that is why we do it. And a lot of times we've actually gotten comments during a meeting and expecting to give them to you. So like we need to have some sort of rule to fall back on. If we say like, I'm sorry, but we can't forward this to the commission at this point. So if we got something at 4 o'clock in the afternoon on a meeting night, we'd have to say like, well, you know, I'm sorry, we can't forward it to the commission at this point, but please come and give your testimony in person. The thing is that we want to be able to give the commission enough time to actually feel that they've gotten through all of the material that they received, and not feel like they have to A, rush through it, or B, miss it, because we want to be fair to the public so that their comments are heard, and be fair to all of you who also have jobs to actually get through everything that we feel that you need to look at before the meeting.
Thanks. Move to the next page, which is page 7, still in 4, and now we're on E, motions by the commission on applications. One concern, as I've noted, is this is limited to applications when it doesn't deal with other business at all. So we don't seem to have any general set of rules about how we're going to vote other than on applications. And the I seem to have lost one of my notes, so just bear with me. So down to G.
Is it the one about the quorum?
I don't think so. Which one is the quorum?
Item 2. Oh, no, I'm sorry, I'm in the wrong section.
Okay, so down to G. So we're now in, I think this must be 4B.
Oh, you were talking about voting?
I am. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So so it's 4G. And it's on page 8. And I think one problem is the fact that we're having trouble here is because this category called meeting management seems to have almost an entire set of rules buried within it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of stuff might be easier to find if they were pulled out from the things that are management of meetings into other kinds of processes.
Mm-hmm.
But on that, I think this one raises a bunch of concerns for me.
Mm-hmm.
One of them, as written, voting must be initiated by the chair. So a member cannot make a motion unless the chair invites it. That is troublesome for me. Simple majority of present members is required. That does not seem problematic. But it also prohibits action without a motion. And as we've talked about before, the framing of a motion could be outcome determinative. So if a motion to grant an application has a split vote, that means that the application is not granted. If the motion is to deny the application and there's a split vote, that means it is granted. And it's just again, a question of how it got framed, and which, as you know from previous discussions, is problematic. So I think this section needs some more work and thinking through, including whether A, we always need a motion, B, if we do need a motion, why a motion can only be initiated by the chair by requesting the motion.
I think that from a legal, sorry, Mr. Chairman, through you, from a legal department perspective, before a vote, we always need a motion. But I see but yes, so anybody should be able to call a motion.
Right.
Yeah.
On the question of, and this is a longer discussion, and I have to confess, I dropped the ball on it. I know we'd had a discussion about whether a motion was needed. I saw the material from legal, and I didn't read it as saying there needed to be a motion. I just read it as saying there needs to be a vote, which I don't disagree with. And I think legal may have thought, can we act without formally taking action? And that's what may have been what was understood by the question of the motion. And I'm totally at fault because I said I would follow up with legal on it, and I didn't.
That's okay.
So I think my other comments were basically about form.
Mhm.
So I won't bore people with those and ask staff to take a look about some of those concerns, whether some stuff ought to be grouped differently or ordered differently, and you'll see notes on some of those. Although I did not include a note specifically about having sort of too much material stuck into meeting management. So that's an oral comment I'm making now, as I realized as I went through it.
Yeah, we can look at those categories. Okay, good. This is helpful.
And again, apologies for me for not having gotten to sooner.
No, that's okay.
But looking this over, Dick, though, it's helpful. We'll be sending things like this to you forever. Can't escape.
That's what I was afraid of.
We'll find you.
Change your email, Dick. Change your email.
So we're gonna rehash this next month or next 2 weeks, next meeting.
Yeah, ideally I will get it to you, updates in the next meeting. If not, it'll be the meeting after that, but I will endeavor to get it to you next time. You'll know if it's in your packet.
Okay. Go back. We had, I think the last thing was the CPC.
Right. It's essentially, I think we met on the 7th, and there's no update since the 7th. The CPC met at the beginning of the month, and it's meeting again tomorrow, but it has not met in between and hasn't taken any action. And Sarah, do you know if anything more got done with regard to the Adams Magoon house? We had voted, the CPC had asked us to take a vote basically on the significance of it, and we had, but I don't know if anything has been directed back. I didn't see anything in the package I got from Roberta.
Correct. Mr. Chairman, through you, actually, I was just talking with, when did I mention this? I mentioned this to Chair Parks right before this meeting started. I think you might have stepped away for 1 second, Mr. Bauer. In that, I just want him to just take a quick look at that draft that I drew up tomorrow morning. And then I was talking with Roberta about it this morning as well.
Okay.
And that you all will have it tomorrow night.
That was just formalizing discussion last meeting we had about.
That's right.
That's saying more what it was about
Why
the
is this
property that's important.
Right, exactly.
And you may remember that there were some questions for the city solicitor's office about the scope of a clawback provision, where if the property got sold, under what circumstances would money come back? And I don't know whether there's any more news about that from the city solicitor's office. I didn't see anything again in the package from Roberta, but there may be that stuff she'll report to us orally.
I can tell you, if I could, Mr. Chairman, through you, I've done some additional research into the property, and might have found the owner's will from 1824 and might have found the inventory of contents of the house.
Ooh,
Uh-huh.
so you're gonna tell us 1824, the will gave the house to the city of Somerville and we have it and that's the end of all the.
No. Nor did he give it to Charlestown because it's still part of Charlestown. But yeah, I found his obit and all sorts of things. So he was in his obituary appeared in Boston papers, Salem papers, I think Essex and Portsmouth, which at the time was like a pretty significant area to cover considering the speed at which news traveled. So he was yeah, he was somebody.
The other thing I should mention about the CPC tomorrow is that it's the annual hearing on the CPC plan. So we're looking at, so what should the CPC be doing differently over the next year? Should it be allocating more money for historic preservation? Should it be allocating less money and so forth? So that will be the bulk of the agenda tomorrow. Although we may get to the Adams Magoon House as well.
Right. Mr. Chairman, if I could through you, Mr. Bauer, I've spent some time talking with Ms. Cameron on this too. And one of the things that I've always been challenged with a bit is I think it's so important for the public to know before the start of the hearing that you're required to spend a certain amount of money in each category. And I think that sometimes that's lost on the public participants. You know, it seems to see that, you know, with like public outreach and whatnot, and from past comments, you know, at this annual meeting. So, yeah, just thinking about ways in which we could get that understood a little better, because there are certainly pressures from interested groups, and rightly so. So I will be there tomorrow as well, giving a very brief, no more than 5-minute presentation.
I left it, Dick, that you're still our person, right, until we're through, because I'm planning to attend also, but I'll just be in the background listening. Okay.
Right, we said that I was on, it was actually a little bit ambiguous, whether I'm simply on through April or whether if we decide on Adams Magoon tomorrow, that's the end and you're on as of April. We'll see what happens on Adams Magoon. It may be that those two things will end up being the same thing.
Sure.
But thank you again, Eric, for stepping forward and being willing to do that.
Thank you for doing it all these years.
It's been my pleasure.
Say all these years, but it doesn't seem that long ago that we're voting to create the CPC.
No. More than 10 years now.
Wow. Okay. Well, I think that's everything on our agenda for tonight then. And unless somebody else has anything else to bring up, we could adjourn our meeting.
I move that we vote to adjourn the meeting.
I second that, and I do not move to extend the meeting past 9 p.m.
Okay, could stipulate that. We have this motion. All in favor of this Vice Chair Kelly's motion, say aye.
Aye.
Do a roll call, Vice Chair Kelly. You support your motion?
Yes.
Bauer?
Yes.
Gagnon?
Yes.
And I'll vote yes. So there we have it. Thank you all.
All right, good to see you all.
Tomorrow. Yeah, and the rest of you all
Yeah,
see.
Mr. Chairman, I will call you sometime after 8 a.m. tomorrow, but before 10.
Okay,
All right,
be around.
sounds
Thanks.
good.
See you
Nice to
guys.
see you all.
Ready?
Bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Good night, y'all.